morning, and welcome to Mainline Unitarian Church. My name is Anders Back, and I'm a member of our Board of Trustees. I'm really thankful once again that we can see each other in person today. That's because this time together is the centerpiece of our church's communal life. At MLC, we wish to nurture a loving community that supports us in our individual spiritual growth and empowers us to work for justice in the world. I'd like to welcome those of you who may be visiting MLUC today, whether in person or online. Please plan to stop by the visitors table in the atrium or become a member section on our website where you can learn more about us. I'm very pleased to remind you that next Sunday, August 15th, will be our first and much anticipated sermon by our new interim Reverend David Messner. So please make a note of that on your calendar. Also, unfortunately, given the quickly changing health status in our counties, our surrounding counties, please watch for emails and check our website for updates on our services. Because the sad reality is that the circumstances and the setup of our services can change at any time, and there's always the possibility that next Sunday we may have to move outdoors. So just keep an eye out for that situation. Religious literacy is the subject of today's sermon, and I found myself thinking a good deal about the roots of our Unitarian faith after watching the recent hearings about the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. I was surprised to learn from my reading that the Capitol itself was approved for use as a church in 1800, and Sunday services, including Unitarian services, were held there until the 1870s. Both President Jefferson and President Madison worshiped there, and possibly one or two others as well. I didn't get that far in my reading. Coincidentally, today is also the 258th birthday of Charles Bullfinch, who was a distinguished Unitarian who became the second architect of the U.S. Capitol in 1818. He designed the Capitol's first dome, which was actually made of wood. The current rotunda, the one we're all familiar with, was designed by Bullfinch's successor as Capitol architect, Thomas U. Walter, who some of you may remember or recognize his name. He designed the Chester County Courthouse, Girard College, and a number of other significant buildings in our region. Among Charles Bullfinch's other accomplishments were the design of Boston Common, Faneuil Hall, and several Unitarian churches in Massachusetts. Despite, or perhaps because of this, his constant work as an architect for nonprofits, he was often in debt and was once incarcerated for debt in a prison that he himself had designed. Following the service, you're invited to share in conversation and refreshments outside of our building. Now, please join me in reciting the mission of our church. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. Now, please take a moment to silence your electronic devices as we settle into the spirit of worship with our prelude.
Welcome to you all, here and at home. If today is your first visit to MLUC, please stay afterward and join us out front for some conversation and coffee. We're pleased to welcome back to the pulpit today the Reverend Dr. Nathan Walker. As president of 1791 Delegates, a public charity named after the year the Bill of Rights was ratified, he manages the Foundation for Religious Literacy and recently founded religionandpubliclife.org. He serves as the associate editor of the peer-reviewed academic journal Religion and Education and has published 5 books, including Cultivating Empathy, which Publishers Weekly listed in November 2016 as one of the top post-election spiritual detox books. If you remember, in 2016, we were very depressed. He completed a research fellowship at Harvard and received his doctorate in First Amendment law from Columbia University, where he received his Master of Arts and Master of Education degrees. Reverend Nate is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister and received his Master of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary, and currently serves as the community minister for religion and public life at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Welcome back.
You can just mention that I'm a nerd.
Oh, and he's a nerd. Reverend Nate, Dawn Starr, and I will be approaching our theme, religious literacy, from different starting points, and I think you'll find the service stimulating and thought-provoking, and fun, as you'll see. And Dr. Vincent Craig will provide a combination of ancient and modern music, along with some familiar hymns. He'll begin now with our prelude, Voluntary, on an old German hymn tune.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Starr Saras-Borschelt, and I'm your Director of Lifespan Faith Development. Our chalice lighting words this morning are adapted from Popularity by David O. Rankin. Our worship is not an entertainment. Our congregation is not an audience. Our music is not a concert performance. Our preaching is not a trivial comfort. Our theology is not a marketing strategy. Our counseling is not a promise of prosperity. Our church is not a business enterprise. Our success is not a membership statistic. We are a people of faith, gathered in a religious tradition, held in community with each other and the world. I invite you to sing with me hymn number 28, For All That Is Our Life. If you are here, please rise. If you are at home, please stay where you are comfortable, or as you are able in either place. That is our life. Sing our thanks. I need a couple of helpers. Actually, I need lots of helpers, but first I need a couple of helpers who would be willing to carry around a microphone. So Liz is going to be one, and Jean would be the other. All right. Because we're going to play Jeopardy. So I will also need some contestants in a moment. Because here's our Jeopardy board, yes. So if you would like to take a shot at answering a question or questioning an answer, as the Jeopardy case may be, raise your hand and one of our microphone holders will bring you a microphone and you get to pick. Nate can answer the questions too, although I think he's pretty knowledgeable in this. So who would like to answer a question? Okay, so we've got our first contestant. Okay, so Anders, which would you like?
Let's see, I guess I'll go with Eastern Religions for 100.
Okay. The balance to yin, the female aspect of Taoism. So just a reminder, in Jeopardy, the proper response is what is, and then the thing.
What is yang?
And you are correct. All right, who's next?
It's like only this side wants to play.
We'll get there.
Unitarian Universalism for 100.
Okay. The number of principles promoted by Unitarian Universalism grounded in the humanistic teachings of the world religions.
What is 7?
You are currently correct, although we hope we'll be moving towards 8 in the near future. Anybody over here? Give Jean something to do? Okay, who else? We're not going to do all 15 of them, but we are going to do a few more than this. Okay.
Abrahamic religions.
For 100?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. The members of the Trinity.
I know this one, being a good Jew. Father, what is Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost?
Yes! All right. A little more enthusiasm here, people. Okay. Okay, somebody over there. Somebody's willing over there. Thank you, thank you. Jim.
Unitarian Universalism, 300.
The Union of the Unitarian and Universalist Churches in 1961.
What became of the Unitarian Association and the Universalist Society of Churches in the 20th century.
That is a better answer than what this Jeopardy board has on it, which was, what is the Unitarian Universalist Association? But I think your answer was better, so thank you very much. Okay. Let's do like two more. So who else wants a turn? Sally wants a turn. Okay, Sally will take a turn.
UU for 400.
Oh, we're brave. Okay. This symbol, originating during World War II time period, is currently used by the Unitarian Universalist faith.
What is the chalice?
Yes. What is the chalice? All right, one more, and then we'll move on. Okay, Roderick.
Abrahamic for 200.
Okay. The founder of Judaism.
Moses? Well, what is Moses?
Or who is Moses? Oh, yeah. Who? Or no, not. That's the wrong answer, though. Who is Abraham? Although I totally understand why we get Moses as an answer to that one, because it makes a lot of sense, and you could make that argument, I think. But, well, yes, or you could make that argument, who is God? Yeah. Okay. So thank you for playing along with me. I really appreciate having a little bit of fun with that. I wanted to do this today because we can learn about religions, and we should, but having this knowledge, this Jeopardy level knowledge, facts about all the different religions, isn't enough for us as Unitarian Universalists. It's like trying to learn a language by only ever studying vocabulary or grammar. We also want to build our skills as people with good religious literacy. It's like if we were learning a language and we practiced by going and talking to somebody who already knows the language really well. That would be the next step after you learn some vocabulary, right? And with religion, this is exactly what we do in our church when we run our 6th and 7th grade class, which is called Neighboring Faiths, or we're actually calling it Crossing Paths now, or it used to be called Church Across the Street. And I wonder, has anybody here ever taken that class or taught that class? Yeah, a bunch of us have done that. So when we visit other faith communities and talk with the people we meet there to learn more about their religion and how we can relate to it as Unitarian Universalists, that's building those religious literacy skills. But that's not enough either. We also want to cultivate an attitude of religious literacy. And the story I like to tell about this one is about my son, Wolfgang, who is at home sleeping because he's a teenager. But when he was a tween, he went to his Neighboring Faiths class, and he didn't like it. He complained. The church we were at that point had donuts every morning, and he was really miffed that he was getting cheated out of his donuts on the weeks that they went on field trips. So he made me buy him donuts every week to make up for that. But a year or two later, he had a friend who was having a bat mitzvah, and he went to that bat mitzvah with an attitude of humility and curiosity. When we got in the car to drive there, he turned to me and said, "Okay, Mom, what do I need to know in order to be a good guest at this thing?" And that's exactly what we need to ask ourselves when we go out in the world and we're interacting with people from different religious traditions than our own. What do we need to know to be good guests, or more accurately, good neighbors, most of the time? It's like when you're learning a language and you know you aren't all the way there yet, you are missing some words and you're not going to do it perfectly, but you go out and you try to talk to people in the neighborhood where you live or where you're visiting, and you're able to order lunch, and that's awesome, and everybody kind of giggles at you, but it's okay because you're getting to figure things out and learn more. There's one more layer to being fully religiously literate people, and that's our motivation. If you think about learning a language, this part is about understanding why you want to know the language in the first place. Do you want to go to Japan? Are you trying to talk to your Hispanic neighbor who lives next door? What's your goal here? And if you look at our UU principles and our sources, it turns out that it's pretty clear why we want to know things about other religions and build our skills at interacting with people of other faiths and have an attitude of humility and curiosity. It's because we're motivated to learn from the wisdom in other religions, and we want to make the world a better place. And we're pretty sure that we can be more effective at making the world a better place if we really understand what's deeply important to other people. And for a lot of people, there's no better way to understand what's really important to them than to understand their faith. I'm going to go outside and play with a parachute. So any kids or youth who would like to join me in doing that are welcome to do so. You're also welcome to stay and hear Reverend Nate preach about religious literacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. That was fun. And remember, there's free coffee for all the winners afterward, and even for the people who didn't win. The recipient of half our plate this summer is the Interfaith Hospitality Network of the Main Line. Their mission is to help families experiencing homelessness and low-income families achieve sustainable independence. They work to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. Under normal circumstances, recently housed families remain vulnerable to a housing crisis as they work to increase their income and build their assets. It often takes years for a family to become housing stable and economically self-sufficient. When the pandemic struck, these families were particularly vulnerable, including their recent graduates, many of whom lost their jobs or experienced reduced wages. In response, IHN launched the Graduate Self-Sufficiency Program in late March, providing an ongoing case management and comprehensive basic needs support. 7 families immediately enrolled in the program, and they have all maintained their housing. Your offering this morning will help the families of IHN find their way to housing stability. Please be generous. Thank you, Vincent. And thank you for opening your heart and your resources. Every week in Candles of Community, we share the happy and sad events that are occurring in our community. It's an opportunity to speak and remember the names of those who are experiencing significant life events. We light a candle to recognize the ongoing suffering, uncertainty, and discord in our country as we continue to struggle with COVID. To those who are ill, and for all of us, we hold you in our hearts. Wendy Schmidt had a knee replaced this last week and is doing very well. To Wendy, we hold you in our hearts. We remember Barbara Weil, a long-term member of MLUC. She passed away last Tuesday. If you would like to express your condolences to her daughter, Nancy Cotterman, call or email Mary Heil in the office for contact information. To Barbara Weil and her daughter Nancy, we hold you in our hearts. Robert Barker reports that his wife, Cynthia Barker, had surgery and remains in Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia. To Robert and Cynthia, we hold you in our hearts. Leslie and John Bass are mourning the death of Leslie's sister, who died on Thursday after several years of illness. Jane Ellen Rikers Pack was 81 years old. Her home was in Dallas, Texas. John and Leslie flew out to visit her and her family last month when she began hospice care. They and the family will miss her greatly. To Leslie and John, and to Jane Ellen Rikers Pack and their whole family, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle of community in remembrance of Barbara Weil McInerney, who died this week in Florida. Her daughter was with her. There will be a memorial service at MLUC in the near future, and her ashes will be buried in our memorial garden next to her first husband, Bob Weil's ashes. For Barbara Weil McInerney, her daughter, family, and friends, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle of celebration for Thomas and Betsy McElwain, who will celebrate their 50th anniversary, wedding anniversary, on Saturday, August 14th. Tom and Betsy, we hold you in our hearts. Steve and Mary Banks have shared that they will celebrate their 54th wedding anniversary on August 12th. Steve and Mary, we hold you in our hearts. And Reverend Nate's husband, Vikram, arrived yesterday in Mumbai, India, where he has begun to care for his parents, both of whom are seriously ill with COVID. Please hold them in your hearts, and Reverend Nate and Vikram. We hold you in our hearts. And for joys and sorrows too deep to speak, we hold you in our hearts. Thank you. Lots of people to think about today. Our reading today considers the challenge of combining unity and diversity. At the end, there'll be a moment of silence for your own reflection. This story is about being religiously multilingual, literally on the ground in Afghanistan, by Army Chaplain George A. Tiger. It's an excerpt from his book, War Zone Faith, an Army Chaplain's Reflections from Afghanistan. You sergeant or commandant? A young Afghan lieutenant asks me as he points to the cross on my chest. I try to explain what a chaplain is. In the end, he suggests Army Mullah, and I agree. Not the most accurate description, but the most meaningful for him. Chaplain has little meaning. Mullah, on the other hand, is something he knows and understands. Together with Army, we have a term that means something to both of us. As the night wears on, the Afghan lieutenant and I speak more, with the help of an interpreter, about our very different faiths. We both affirm that the ultimate character of the divine is love. We both believe that the task of religion is to help us live more whole lives. We both participate in a religious community of fellow travelers who give us strength. Certainly, the words we use are very different. Yet, as we do our best to translate our different faith languages into our native tongues, we discover more in common than we thought. That is what I call being religiously multilingual. You need not accept someone else's language. You do not even have to speak another religious language fluently. But you should try to understand enough so that you can carry on a meaningful conversation, build mutual understanding, and forge lasting relationships across religious difference. Every such conversation is an opportunity to move the world toward peace. Thank you. And now, Reverend Nate.
Something remarkable happened in 2012. For the first time in US history, Protestants became a minority in the United States. They made up 48% of the population, and by 2019, they have declined to 44% of the population. So what this means is that America consists of no one religious group representing more than half the population. This challenges us to do something that no other generation has done in human history, and that is to prepare the next generation to self-govern a nation of religious minorities. This requires that professionals in every sector of society promote the public understanding of religion. We must build a religiously literate citizenry. A nation of religious minorities requires that religious literacy is a precondition to promoting peaceful coexistence. So what's at stake here? Why is this so urgent? The problem is that there is vast illiteracy about religion. When it comes to religion and public life, in American politics and our laws, we see that people are motivated and driven by illiteracy, disinformation, and contempt. Misinformed people can transmit moral contagions to one another, justifying the increases in social hostilities and even violence toward the most vulnerable among us. Here's an example. If you look at the Anti-Sharia Bills in state legislations, you'll see that there has been an attempt to prey on the public's illiteracy about Islam and American Muslims in order to achieve political gain. There's this vast illiteracy about what Sharia means, rather than understanding it correctly as spiritual practices and ways to organize one's life, to manage one's consumption in order to inspire one's devotion. Instead, these legislators have deemed the Sharia to be a threat to America. This is inaccurate, it is ignorant, and dangerous. From 2010 to 2017, there were over 200 anti-Sharia bills introduced by 43 state legislatures. The bills specifically say that courts must ban the use of foreign religion in any determination of law. I manage the Foundation for Religious Literacy, and our project during COVID was to build religionandpubliclife.org, a social learning community where we promote the public understanding of religion. One of our partners is the Smithsonian, where we are turning their exhibits, their history, their research into online courses to promote the public understanding of religion. They recently did an exhibit on religion in early American history where they demonstrate that at the founding of the country, 5% of the population consisted of Muslims. That's 5 times more than there are today. The fact is, there has never been an America without Muslims. There has never been an America that has deliberately, at its founding period specifically, targeted Muslims for invidious discrimination. In fact, you can see from the writings of the founding presidents, the founding fathers, or writers of the Declaration of Independence, signers, that they, in their writings, were constantly including Muslims, Turks, Mohammedans, as a protected group within the dream of American religious liberty. But the fact is that there is vast illiteracy today, not only about Islam, but also about the law. The fact that there were 43 state legislators that introduced these bills suggests that there is a population that will support these legislators in completely denying the First Amendment rights of Muslims, in completely rejecting the notion of the Establishment Clause that says that you cannot privilege another religion over another. This is really clear doctrine within the jurisprudence of our American judiciary. And yet, the politicians recognize that there is political utility in religious illiteracy. It has a function to keep them in power. You have all heard President Trump, and when he was running for president, talk about extreme vetting of Muslims. He introduced a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the US, the quote language he used when introducing the travel ban. He said that there was, quote, absolutely no choice to shut down American mosques. The travel ban targeted 6 Muslim-majority countries, and as a result of this, 14 state legislators introduced a new wave of anti-Sharia bills. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that these anti-Sharia bills are unconstitutional. And yet, the governors of Arkansas, Texas, and Kansas signed them into law anyway, after they knew they were unconstitutional, demonstrating not only their illiteracy and contempt for American Muslims, but their contempt for the Constitution. The political rewards for this go as follows. I, as your Savior, am going to come in and I'm going to protect you from foreign invaders. I'm going to appeal to white Christians specifically who are illiterate about Islam, and I'm going to breed this fear, and you need me to save you. Elect me, and I will protect you. What? The court just said that this is unconstitutional? Elect me, and I will get rid of those activist judges. Elect me, and I will protect you from all the things I taught you to fear. It is a perfect contained political rulebook that occurs over and over, and there are very severe consequences, specifically with the dramatic rise in religious-based hate crimes. Anti-Muslim hate crimes correlate with the timing of President Trump's anti-Muslim tweets. Additional research shows that counties that hosted a 2016 Trump rally saw a 226% increase in reported hate crimes as compared to counties that did not host such rallies. From 2015 to the start of 2018, there were 44 states that experienced some form of anti-Muslim hate, of vandalism of mosques, the break-ins of their community centers, the denying of building permits. 23 of these states saw 5 or more of these incidents. The FBI reported that hate crimes against Muslims has been at an all-time high. Pew Research Center said that the assault against Muslims surpassed the 2001 9/11 level. The Council for American Islamic Relations, CARE, articulated that in 2017, there were 2,600 anti-Muslim incidents, 300 of which included hate crimes, which was a 17% increase from the year before. If that wasn't enough, take a look at what has been happening in U.S. public schools. There is a rise in religious-based bullying, specifically against Muslims. Research shows from the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding that 2 in 5 Muslims with children in K-12 schools reported bullying of their children because of their religion. Protestants, Catholics, Jews did not see increases. It was a dramatic rise for Muslims alone. And yet, I hope you're sitting down for this, 1 in 4 of those bullies were the teachers. They were school officials. This means that public servants in our public schools were taking the cues of other politicians and adopting this rhetoric in the classroom, causing harm to children. 6 in early 18 who are often misidentified as Muslims because they wear turbans. And yet in the United States, 99% of those who wear turbans are a part of Sikhism or Sikhi. In early 2018, 6 were experiencing in America 1 hate crime per week. Over the following 2 years, there was a 200% increase in anti-Sikh hate crimes. Jews at the same time were experiencing an all-time high in religious-based violence against them. The Tree of Life Synagogue is just one horrific example. The anti-Semitic incidents rose by 57% in 2017. This is the largest single increase on record. There is a remedy to these social hostilities and violence, and that is religious literacy. Now, let me make clear, I'm not saying that the white supremacist who is armed with guns is somehow going to be enlightened because he finally learns the 5 pillars of Islam, right? This is not going to be accurate. Religious literacy is not a direct intervention to stopping violence. But religious literacy is a precondition in every single profession to ensure that there are leaders, that there are religiously literate leaders in each profession who serve as antibodies in that system so that we never reach this tipping point again. Imagine religiously literate journalists accurately reporting on religion, specifically about Muslims. Imagine school teachers using an academic approach and a constitutionally friendly approach to teach about religion, to prepare the next generation to be religiously literate in this extraordinarily diverse society. Imagine lawyers who are defending the First Amendment rights of every person and explicitly identifying the bias in the legal system. Because the fact is, if you are white and Protestant, you win 70% of your free exercise cases before the US judiciary. If you are Native American, Catholic, or Jew, you win about 44% of the time. If you are an American Muslim coming before the courts, seeking to defend your First Amendment right to gather, to worship, to practice your religion, you win 1/3 of your cases. Imagine if there were judges and lawyers and legislators who were religiously literate, who were seeking to counter the bias within that profession. Imagine there were medical professionals, nurses, doctors, who were illuminating their profession to ensure that at the bedside, every person from every religion or non-religion is protected in a way that honors their dignity and their faith. Could we develop more understanding about what religiously motivates people to engage in this medical practice or not? I'm not just talking about blood transfusions and other, anti-vaccination claims on religious exemptions. I'm talking about everyday life, how people live their life, their dietary practices, their views, their values. Medical professionals must be religiously literate in order to care for that whole person. Business leaders must prepare a religiously literate staff in order to promote peaceful coexistence in the workplace, to protect First Amendment freedoms in the workplace, as well as to prepare to serve a religiously diverse clientele. And don't get me started on why voters need to be religiously literate so that we never see these anti-Sharia bills again. So what is religious literacy? As you saw from my colleague Dawn earlier, she articulated this Kazam method that my colleagues and I have developed, where we promote knowledge, skills, attitudes, and motivations. In this acronym, knowledge is not simply about understanding how we gather, what different religious groups use when it comes to holidays and their holy days, their dietary practices, their religious garb. It is more than just knowledge and trivia and facts about religion, right? It is having a kind of vocabulary, a kind of fluency, so that the school board member can negotiate the school calendar effectively, so that the judge can examine how religious minorities are affected by a general neutral law. Doctors, school teachers, journalists, and so on. When my colleagues and I were co-editing the Oxford Handbook on Religion and American Education, we explicitly solicited Ben Marcus, a specialist in religious literacy, to articulate what he understood to be the fluency of religion. And he equated it to how, when he was studying Spanish in high school, he learned certain skills and vocabulary and so on, and he passed his tests and he did well and he was able to get into this college because he met those language requirements. And then he went to Spain and he could not speak, he wasn't fluent. And so Ben Marcus in the Oxford Handbook really speaks about the importance of religious literacy as a form of deep fluency. It's not just trivia. And that's why we introduced this acronym of KAZAM: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and motivations. Skills is a type of methodology. It's not just the content, right? It's how we study the content. It's a conceptual lens. It is a way to investigate further the content. And this rests on three premises, according to my professor at Harvard Divinity School, Diane Moore. She talks about how, one, there's a basic premise when you engage in the academic study of religion, and that it is the premise that religions are internally diverse. Two, that religions change over time. Three, they are embedded in all aspects of culture. So, if we have the premise that religions are internally diverse, the next time we see that Lutheran minister on TV speaking about this matter or that matter, we recognize, as religiously literate people about the many different Christianities in America, that that Lutheran pastor does not speak for all Christians. Imagine if we did that with the 1.9 billion Muslims in the world. Imagine if we recognize the vast internal diversity within Islam, which represents 1/4 of the world's population. Premise number 2 is that religions change over time. Ireland is a good example of this. It's one of the most Catholic countries in the world, with 78% of its population identifying as Catholic. And yet, through a voter referendum to change their constitution, they allowed for not only pro-choice, but they allowed for same-sex marriage. As Irish Catholics, they deliberately went against the Catholic Church's doctrines and teachings, suggesting two things: that there's one, internal diversity within Catholicism, and two, religions change over time. They're dynamic, they're responsive, they evolve, they are facing internal and external pressures. The third premise is that religions are embedded in all aspects of culture. When I studied the First Amendment rights of teachers in the United States, I found that there were 22 states throughout the last 126 years that banned teachers from wearing religious garb in the classroom. All of these states started to do so as a way to ban Catholic nuns who were wearing a habit from teaching in public schools. Nebraska recently repealed its anti-garb law. Oregon recently repealed its anti-garb law. Pennsylvania is the only remaining state that has an anti-religious garb law, one that was driven by anti-Catholic sentiment. In Oregon, literally the leaders of the KKK who were running the legislature at the time were talking about how we need to have a white Christian Protestant nation. And by enacting these laws, we will prevent teachers from indoctrinating our children. If you, by yourself on what you would wear, would lead me to be indoctrinated, then I would become a Phillies fan. But I'm from the West Coast, and I really like the Giants. Exposure to difference doesn't mean that it's a threat to your own identity. It just means there is diversity with human expression. The fact is, you cannot check your religious identity at the schoolhouse gate. The fact is that you cannot clock in and clock out your religion when you go to work. You don't just determine what you eat and what you don't eat on a given day because of what some organization or government is telling you. No, you have these values, and therefore religiously motivated actions and beliefs are embedded in all aspects of culture, and it is our duty to lean in to understand them, which leads to the A part of the Kazam, attitude. We must have a disposition of empathetically encountering the religious other. We must have an attitude of curiosity, of openness, of intellectual honesty to understand why someone identifies as an atheist, why somebody identifies as spiritual but not religious, why someone identifies in this way and that way. The thing is, when we have this attitude, this curiosity, we seek to understand how people are forming their religious identities. My colleague Ben Marcus articulates these 3 B's of religious identity formation: belief, behavior, belonging. You could take people in the same family, let's take a Jewish family, and at the dinner table go around and figure out who has more of a dominant belief in being Jewish as compared to more acts of behavior to practice their Judaism. Or who doesn't necessarily engage in the traditional aspects of religious gathering, but because of their ethnicity and their family, they feel like they belong. Belief, behavior, belonging. You can take 10 different people in the same tradition, and you can see that all those formations of belief, behavior, belonging are distinct, are different. So it takes an attitude of understanding to lean into that complexity, to understand how those belief, behaviors, and belonging acts might change over time. Another important thing to understand is to recognize that throughout religious traditions, there could be so much division, let's say from Orthodox Judaism to Reform Judaism, for instance, that there is so much difference between them that they often don't communicate or engage one another. Instead, if you were to line up all the religions in a series of rows and then divide them up by ideology, you would see that a liberal Jew has more in common with, let's say, an African Methodist Episcopal congregation than a Orthodox Jew would have more in common with, say, a Southern Baptist. You can have more in common across ideologies, across religious traditions, than you have within your own religious tradition. This is what it means to have an attitude of curiosity, to lean in and to understand how religion actually works, which goes to the final part of the acronym M, motivation. I introduced this part of the acronym in our field in order to get at a kind of code of ethics for the field of religious literacy. When I was leading the Religious Freedom Center in Washington, D.C., I was seeing that at the State Department and with some military chaplains and specifically some military personnel, that they were motivated to learn about religion, specifically Islam, in order to cause harm to them. Right? Their goal was, I need to know every single thing about Islam and about Muslims so that I can, quote, defend my country from them. So that when I go and I'm deployed, I will know exactly how to cause harm in the name of justice and security. The same thing was happening with police departments and the FBI with surveillance of mosques that were found unconstitutional. There's a kind of motivation to learn about the religious other in order to cause them harm. That is not religious literacy. That is unethical. We must require that in the field of religious literacy, we require that one must do no harm. It's the ethic of non-maleficence. It is to do no harm for the other. But we can't stop there. We must promote beneficence. We must do good, not just prevent harm. In order to do that, we have to have our motivations be grounded in both legally literate premises as well as religiously literate premises. This leads me to the 3 R's of religious liberty. The Williamsburg Charter articulates that every person has rights, every person has the responsibility to protect the rights of others, and we must do so respectfully. My colleague, Dr. Kate Sules, and I had the privilege of creating a curriculum for Cub Scouts where they got a patch to become 3 R's ambassadors in their public schools, where these kids in New York City are coming to their classroom and they say to their 3rd grade teacher, I'm a 3 R's ambassador. I'm here to make sure that we protect everyone's rights and that I will take responsibility to be an ambassador and we will do so respectfully. And the teacher's like, huh? What is this 8-year-old doing? And all of a sudden that 8-year-old becomes an antibody in that system of social hostilities in order to promote religious literacy in a school that, as we saw earlier, had teachers engaging in religious-based bullying. If we prepare the next generation to engage in being religiously literate citizens, we can promote what I call liberty squared, liberty with a little 2 at top, right? Where we multiply freedom by itself. The first stage is to promote liberty as independence. Right? It's that moment of like, I am free, I have the autonomy to make my decisions, I will practice self-determination, I deserve emancipation, I am free to live my conscience. This is the dominant ethic in the field of religious liberty. It's a me-centered culture of my rights, my rights, my rights. That is a very important starting point, but we cannot stop there. We must multiply liberty by itself and move from independence to interdependence, where we collectively defend the rights of people other than ourselves, from a me-centered liberty movement to an other-centered liberty movement. The fact is, all rights movements throughout history have all depended upon that tipping point when people other than those marginalized are defending their rights. And that's what it means to promote liberty squared. So in conclusion, let me recap. There is vast illiteracy in America about religion. There is an extraordinary, disturbing trend of increases in social hostilities and violence. To equip the next generation to combat this, they must have the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and motivation to address this head on. And we must prepare every profession in order to train the next leaders in those professions to promote religious literacy as a fundamental civic competency. And why must we do this? Because it is our duty to prepare the next generation to self-govern a nation of religious minorities. Thank you. And now I invite you to rise and sing as you are able. 348, Guide My Feet. Years ago, 2,500 years ago, Heraclitus of Ephesus said, "Whoever wishes to know about the world must learn about it in its particular details. Knowledge is not intelligence. In search for the truth, be ready for the unexpected. Change alone is unchanging. The same road goes up and down. The beginning of a circle is also its end." And so as we end this service, and as you go into the world to encounter the religious other, may you continue to cultivate your religious literacy, and in doing so, widen your circles of compassion. With that, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I had the great privilege of engaging with shared ministry with Jansen when he was serving as our Director of Religious Education. And so in honor of our shared ministry and your lifelong commitment to religious literacy, I would be honored if you would extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.